All right, good afternoon. As you know, the Security Council will discuss peacekeeping operations this afternoon. The Secretary General will deliver remarks, and he is expected to say that UN peacekeeping is an investment in global peace, security, and prosperity, and that we must adapt all peace operations to keep pace with our changing world. He will say that we have a joint responsibility to the people that we serve to make sure that mandates are clear and achievable, and that peace operations are given the support they need. And that meeting, I think, is now scheduled for 4:30, if I'm not mistaken. And in his first briefing to the Security Council as Under-Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix this morning briefed on Mali. He said there had been progress in the implementation of the peace agreement, including with the establishment of interim authorities in a number of cities. However, he noted that there remains important delays and that the gains are fragile. The security situation is also of concern, and terrorist attacks are continuing. Mr. Lacroix stressed that the need to encourage the parties to accelerate the implementation of the peace agreement. He also noted the need to address the scourge of transnational organized crime and its impact on peace efforts. On this issue, the Security Council has already expressed its intention to consider targeted sanctions against spoilers, and Mr. Lacroix said it is time to consider establishing such a sanctions regime. Finally, he reiterated that the UN mission in Mali continues to adjust its priorities and posture in order to provide the best possible support. And at the conclusion of yesterday's Brussels conference, you will have seen that 41 donors pledged a combined $6 billion for 2017 in immediate and longer-term support for Syria and the region, and $3.7 billion for 2018 and beyond. The Emergency Relief Coordinator, Stephen O'Brien, said the conference was, quote, a momentous opportunity for much of the world to come together to commit more support and solidarity for Syrians and those affected by the region. Meanwhile, today, Senior Advisor Jan Egeland held a meeting of the Humanitarian Task Force in Geneva, saying that there are still nearly 5 million people that are in so-called hard-to-reach and besieged areas, which he said is actually a euphemism for civilians that are suffering alone. And UNICEF says at least 27 children were confirmed killed in the attack in Idlib, northwest of Syria. A further 546 people, among them children, have been injured. And casualty figures are expected to rise. And from Iraq, our humanitarian colleagues report that as the fighting continues in West Mosul, humanitarian partners continue to respond to rising casualties and displacement, as well as providing assistance to families in newly accessible areas where conditions allow. Some 1,500 trauma cases have been received at stabilization points near the West Mosul front lines since the offensive on western neighborhoods resumed in late February. More than 6,000 trauma cases have been referred to hospitals in Mosul's surrounding areas since the start of the Mosul operations in late October. Rapid expansion and construction work at camps and emergency sites has continued to accommodate rapidly rising displacement. Currently, more than 5,000 fully serviced plots of land, which provide space for more than 32,000 people, are available for immediate occupancy. Emergency assistance packages have been distributed to cover the immediate need of 1.8 million people, with many families requiring such emergency packages more than once. And in a report presented today, the Secretary General urges all member states to actively support and make the funding for the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, sustainable, predictable, and sufficient. The report says that member states widely value the indispensable role that UNRWA plays in the provision of essential services to Palestinian refugees and the impact it has in the context of unresolved Arab-Israeli conflict. The Secretary General notes in the report that recurring financial crises threaten to disrupt service provision to as many as 5.3 million people. Mr. Kreinbuhl, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, says that the importance of the report lies in both its renewed focus on the plight of Palestine refugees and the determination to improve the resources of UNRWA's vital services. More in a press release available from UNRWA. And global renewable energy capacity has reached record levels in 2016, according to a new UN-backed research released today. This surge happened in spite of a drop of 23% in investment in clean technology, whose costs continue to fall. The proportion of electricity coming from renewables, excluding large hydro, rose from 10.3% to 11.3%, and this prevented an emission of an estimated 1.7 gigatons of carbon dioxide. And our colleagues at the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, have released their monthly food price index, and it tells us that in March we saw a decline of the food price index as sugar and vegetable oils prices slide. The FAO also released its first world cereal supply and demand outlook for the year, expecting it to be another season of relative market tranquility, with grain inventories remaining near record levels. And recognizing the crucial role of small businesses in achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, the General Assembly today adopted a resolution designating June 27th as Micro, Small, and Medium-Sized Enterprises Day. The comments are not appreciated during the briefing. Thank you. The resolution was spearheaded by Argentina with support from the International Council for Small Businesses and co-sponsored by over 45 member states. All right, on a cheery note, also wanted to let you know that American actress Kristen Davis, whom you, Michelle, may remember from Sex and the City, and other roles, has been appointed today as a Goodwill ambassador for UNHCR. Okay, let's try to. What? Was she, no, she wasn't Samantha.
She married the bold divorce.
Charlotte. She was Charlotte. Okay. You know, what isn't part of the press briefing is my question. Michelle, then Masuji.
Thank you, Steph. On a serious note, do you have any update for us on South Sudan and PAJOK and what's been happening there? Have the peacekeepers been allowed in?
No, I do not have anything since we've updated USA. We have asked for the mission for an update, but we haven't received anything. Masood.
Yes, can you tell us how this investigation, and the United Nations is going to hold an investigation into this attack on Idlib, and how extensive is this investigation going to be, if at all it's going to be?
Well, as you know, and I think it was done in the Security Council yesterday by the head of by Mr. Kim Won-soo, the OPCW monitoring group is trying to analyze what has happened. We're obviously waiting to see what comes out in terms of the Security Council the next few days and what is said in the resolution in terms of an investigation. But it is clear that there needs to be an accountability, and we need to get the facts about what exactly happened in this horrendous attack.
So what you're saying is that investigation cannot be held unless the Security Council asks for it?
Well, there is an OPCW monitoring group, which is at work, which is already, which, from the information we've received from them, is already trying to move forward on gathering information. As far as international UN-mandated investigations, they do need a mandate.
The Syrian mission said that they have sent 90 letters to the Secretary General and the Security Council detailing operations of smuggling of chemical weapons into Syria through Turkey. Why these letters have not been acted upon?
You know, most of and I haven't seen those particular letters, often letters from member states are, as requested, distributed to the Security Council. Obviously, the facts will need to be made clear in this attack so that the civilians who suffered in this horrendous attack can get some justice.
But does the Secretary General think that they deserve some consideration by the Security Council?
I think the Secretary General feels that there needs to be accountability for this attack. Mr. Avni.
On another topic, there's a story in one of the news agencies that the Security Council will visit President Trump in the next few days. will that be an opportunity for the Secretary General to seek an audience with His Trumpness?
Benny, as you know, the Secretary General is not a member of the Security Council, so whatever the Security Council does is separate from the Secretary General. As we said, when we have a meeting to announce with the U.S. President, we shall announce it forthright.
Has the SG tried to receive an audience and so far failed? Is that fair to say?
As I will leave the analysis to you, I will try to stick to the facts as I know them.
The facts that he
The
tried?
fact is that we have obviously been in contact with the U.S. authorities, and when we have something to announce, we shall announce it. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, in Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi has basically rejected the findings. The term ethnic cleansing says it hasn't occurred. Seems to be indicating that the UN team could not access the area, but that Kofi Annan, as an individual, could. I'm wondering, what does the Secretariat think of it? Has the Secretary General thought, given the standoff over this, has he spoken since he's been Secretary General to Aung San Suu Kyi, and is he concerned about the growing distance between what she says and what the UN's own experts have found?
I believe if memory serves me right, they spoke fairly early on in his term. I think he has expressed his concern at the situation in Rakhine State, especially, and also the situation having to do with the Rohingyas, both in Rakhine State and the ones who are being hosted generously in Bangladesh. I think we've seen the reports that have come out of discussions with them from various UN mechanisms. We've also gone, led by the Humanitarian coordinator, gone into Rakhine State and reported fairly transparently on what we've seen, and it's clear that the situation there remains of great concern to us.
And can I ask you, also on accountability, the Sri Lankan government, after all this time and resolutions in Geneva and commitments made to the previous Secretary General, has said it is not and will not agree to any war crimes probe. It may look at individuals, but that's basically what was said about accountability is no longer the case.
I think there is an ongoing process between Sri Lanka and our human rights colleagues, and I would leave it at that. Nabil.
Thank you, Stéphane. Can you please remind us about the previous investigations on chemical attacks in Syria? Did the investigation team ask or request full access to air bases, to officers' names, and how did the Syrian government respond on that?
The various teams that were led, I think, if I'm not mistaken, by Virginia Gamba and others before that, is any investigation team tried to get as much information as they could, and they reported back to the council on what they found. And I think it's for everyone, for you, for the international community to see.
And may I follow up?
You may.
Do you think that this information should be part of the investigation? Names, air bases?
I think any investigation, first of all, as I would say, at this point, there's been no mandate for the UN Secretariat to conduct an investigation. But I would say, as a matter of principle, any investigation into horrendous crimes needs to have as much information as possible in order for justice to be served. Yep.
Thank you. There are reports that President Trump is seriously considering a U.S. military action in Syria. Do you have any comments on that?
No, I'm not going to comment on speculative reports that come out. Our focus is obviously on finding a political way out of the current situation.
It doesn't seem to be speculation. He's reported to have informed the Congress members that he is going to.
No, I saw what he has been reported as saying. As I said, we would comment on things once, and if and once they happened. Masuji, and then Richard.
Yeah. Follow up on this question about Aung San Suu Kyi. This is not the first time that she has differed from the United Nations report that there is some sort of action going on in Rakhine State, not necessarily before she took power, but even much before she took power, that had been going on, and the United Nations has been reporting on it. Why is she making such a big difference between what the UN report is saying, what she believes is not true?
I think that's a question you should ask her. I can't speak. I speak for one person, or at least I try. I'm not going to speak for any member state. We are and continue to remain very concerned about the humanitarian situation in Rakhine State. I know the Human Rights Council is trying to send an fact-finding mission. We hope the government cooperates with that, and we continue to call on the government to allow for full humanitarian access in Rakhine State.
So I'm sorry. So let me rephrase it. So am I to understand that the United Nations will try and explain to her what is the situation, what was the...
I think we are trying to improve the situation in Rakhine State. Mr. Roth.
I was just being briefed by a de facto spokeswoman. And my question was asked earlier. He said pausing, but what would I know it's hypothetical, but does the Secretary General view any military action in a nation like Syria by any nation or new nation to combat would be detrimental to an overall political solution, or something that might change the dynamic and punish those responsible for chemical?
Again, we're talking about speculation. Our focus has always been on finding a peaceful political way out of the crisis. We have seen military action as part of as an effort to combat terrorism in Syria. The position of the organization has always been to ensure that civilians are protected and that international law, international humanitarian law is followed. We will not, as I told your colleague, I'm not going to start pontificating on things that may or may not happen, and once things happen, then we will express our opinion. Mr. Lee, and then Nizar.
I guess this is an investigations question. It was said when the Somali refugees were sunk and killed on a boat off the coast of Yemen that there would be some kind of an inquiry. Does the UN have any more idea now on who actually?
I don't. You may want to check. You may want to turn off your mic.
Oh, okay.
And then. Thank you, Tom. Nope. Tom's checking. All right. You may want to. Sorry? Feels like Friday. That's what it feels like. You should check with UNHCR. Sorry. Nizar and then Evelyn.
The 1996 attack on Kana UN compound was investigated, and there were reports and everything, judgment. However, responsibility has not been placed on yet, or accountability has not been implemented on anyone. Does the United Nations still pursue to do justice to the victims?
We seek to do justice to all victims. Evelyn.
The renewable energy you spoke of, where is that to be found? Is that a statement? Nothing's been on the email.
I think it's from our colleagues at DESA, but I will check.
Because it's not. And secondly, when are you releasing the SG speech on peacekeeping?
We'll see if we can get you advanced copies, Mr. Lee.
And
sorry, yes, Evelyn.
You're right. And now, the U.S. Chief for Peacekeeping talked about, recommended sanctions on spoilers. The Russia's deputy ambassador said no. So what happens now? Nothing. No?
Well, obviously the issue of sanctions is firmly in the hands of the Security Council. I think the Secretary General, through Mr. Lacroix, has made his own position known. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I want to ask about the voluntary public disclosure, financial disclosure system under the current Secretary General. In looking at the ones that have been filed for the year of 2016, there are several officials that are not listed even on the list. And I wanted to, get you to confirm that this means that they've declined to make any financial disclosure. One of them is Ismail Ul-Sheikh Ahmed, who we've asked a number of times. Another is Mr. Laborde of the counterterrorism.
I will check the list for myself.
And I guess I wanted to ask you one thing. I've looked at the Secretary General did file, much to his credit, but in comparing his 2016 filing to his filing for 2013, when he filed as head of UNHCR, he, for example, now lists as income from non-UN sources, lifetime entitlement as former Prime Minister of Portugal, and a number of other things, which were not listed in 2013. I wanted to know, did the rules change, or did the level of his commitment to disclosure change? What explains the failure to disclose the things that are in the current form and the past forms?
The issue of disclosing is one that is primarily to the outside firm that handles it, and then staff members can choose whether to make public or private. So I would just focus.
But did the rules change between?
I think we can both check if the rules have changed. Thank you.